What if I told you that every time you mindlessly reach for your phone to check your notifications, you aren't just wasting a few seconds of your time?
Yeah, it's so much more than that.
Right. You are actually physically pouring concrete over a neural highway inside your skull.
Literally.
You are reinforcing a biological structure that practically guarantees you will do the exact same thing tomorrow and, the day after that.
With even less conscious thought, too.
Exactly, because every single action you take is quite literally altering the physical architecture of your brain.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is August 15th, 2026, and we have an incredible mission today.
We really do.
We are exploring a fascinating daily reflection based on two very specific verses from an ancient text, the Bhagavad Gita.
Specifically, chapter 6, verses 44 and 45.
Yeah, and, the core tension we are exploring today is, well, it's this. How does an ancient spiritual philosophy perfectly mirror the highly technical findings of modern behavioral neuroscience?
Right. Because we are not looking at these verses as, like, abstract mystical poetry.
No, not at all.
We are examining them as a deeply practical, rigorously accurate manual for cognitive rewiring and for long-term inner development.
Yeah, an architectural blueprint, really.
Exactly. The text we're analyzing today lays out a blueprint for human behavioral momentum that predates our modern understanding of the brain by thousands of years.
Which is just crazy.
Right. Yet it aligns with it flawlessly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have a massive stack of notes, historical context, and neuroscientific research here.
We do. We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are going to explore the idea of the gravitational pull of our past practices.
Which is a profound concept.
Yeah, and we are going to look at the actual biological mechanics of emotional detoxification.
And we should clarify that is entirely different than, like, the juice cleanse self-help version of the word.
Oh, totally. Completely different. And finally, we're going to dive into the compounding nature of mastery.
What's fascinating here is how the text bridges the gap between our temporary worldly distractions, the acute noise and chaos of everyday life, and our deeper inner impulse for self-awareness.
Right, the stuff that actually matters.
Exactly. And it doesn't treat distraction as some kind of moral failure or anomaly.
Oh, that's such a relief.
Yeah, it treats distraction as an absolute physical given, like outer inertia is going to happen.
It's unavoidable.
Right. So the question the text actually answers is how you build the structural engineering within your own mind to overcome it.
And for you listening, whether you are dealing with a deeply toxic environment at work
Or just struggling with the daily friction of temporary distraction.
Yeah, exactly. Or simply trying to figure out why it is so impossibly difficult to build better mental habits.
These verses offer a mechanical blueprint.
They really do. They detail how to build an internal gyroscope that guides you even when you feel completely off track.
But before we get to the gyroscope, we really have to talk about momentum.
Right. We have to understand what fuels our trajectory in the first place.
Because without that, the rest doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Which brings us to verse 6.44 and this incredible Sanskrit concept of purvabhyasa.
Purvabhyasa. Yeah, so etymologically, it breaks down into two parts.
Okay.
Purva, meaning before or past, and abhyasa, meaning repeated practice or vigorous effort.
So past repeated practice.
Right. It essentially translates to the gravitational pull of past practice.
I love that phrasing.
The specific line in the text reads, Purvavyasana teneva hriyate hyave jupisa.
Wow. Okay, and what does that mean exactly?
It translates to the idea that a person is carried forward almost irresistibly by their former practice, even against outer inertia.
I want to pause on that phrase. Irresistibly carried forward. Avaju pihuyate.
It's a very powerful word choice.
It really is, because it implies a lack of active volition in the present moment.
Exactly.
Like you aren't consciously deciding to be carried forward. The momentum is just doing it for you.
Yeah, you're just along for the ride at that point.
And this is where the source material draws a direct line to modern behavioral neuroscience.
Absolutely.
Because the ancient text calls it purvabhyasa, but a modern neuroscientist would call it heavily reinforced neural circuitry, creating automaticity.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's look at the actual mechanism of how this happens in the brain.
Please. Because I think that explains the irresistible nature of the text.
Right. So when you engage in any behavior or thought pattern, a sequence of neurons fires in your brain.
Okay, so just basic brain activity.
Exactly. An electrical signal, an action potential travels down the axon of a neuron.
Right.
Now, if you do this once, it's just a faint signal. But if you engage in abhyasa repeated practice, your brain recognizes something.
What does it recognize?
It recognizes that this specific pathway is being demanded frequently. And, the brain is an incredibly efficient organ.
Oh, yeah.
It desperately wants to reduce the energetic cost of that repeated signal.
Because the brain consumes a massive amount of calories, right?
A huge amount, yeah.
Right.
Roughly 20% of your body's energy.
Wow. So it wants to automate whatever it can just so it doesn't have to burn so much glucose consciously thinking about it every single time.
Precisely. So to make the signal faster and more energy efficient, the brain deploys specialized glial cells.
Glial cells, okay.
Yeah, specifically oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system. These cells reach out and literally wrap themselves around the axon of the firing neuron.
Wait, they physically wrap around it?
They do. They create what's called a myelin sheath. Think of it like wrapping electrical tape around a frayed wire.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Yeah. This myelin sheath acts as an insulator. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking out.
Which makes it faster.
Exactly. It dramatically increases the speed and the strength of the transmission.
So past mindfulness or contemplative habits, they aren't just fleeting thoughts that evaporate when you stop thinking them.
No, not at all.
By repeatedly practicing them, you are physically thickening the biological insulation around those specific neural pathways.
Yes. You are literally altering the structural reality of your brain.
That is so wild.
Right. The signal travels faster and with less resistance. And over time, that myelinated pathway becomes the path of least resistance for your brain's electrical activity.
So it's no longer a conscious choice?
Exactly. It becomes a physical, structural, gravitational pull.
Which brings us back to the text.
Yes. This is exactly why the text says you are carried forward avasho helplessly or irresistibly.
Because the physical mass of that myelinated pathway exerts a gravitational force on your behavior.
You've built the hardware for it.
Okay, let me push back on this a little bit, or at least reframe it.
Sure.
Because I think there's a disconnect in how we usually talk about this in everyday life.
How do you mean?
Well, when we hear terms like automaticity or the path of least resistance, we are almost universally talking about it in a negative context.
Ah, yeah, that's true.
Right. We talk about breaking bad habits. We talk about the automaticity of addiction or those deeply grooved pathways of negative self-talk and trauma. We are constantly told we need to wake up from our autopilot. It's incredibly rare to hear about automaticity being the hero of the narrative.
That is such a crucial distinction. In modern culture, we have heavily pathologized the concept of habits and automaticity.
We really have.
We view being on autopilot as a moral failing, like it's a sign that we are just sleepwalking through life.
Exactly.
But from a neurobiological standpoint, the brain is entirely agnostic.
Agnostic, meaning it doesn't care.
Exactly. It does not judge the moral quality of the habit. It simply automates whatever you ask it to do most frequently.
So it's just a machine doing its job.
Right. If you constantly doom scroll, it myelinates the doom scrolling pathway.
Oh, too real.
But if you constantly practice returning your attention to the present moment, it myelinates the mindfulness pathway.
So the text is basically saying you can effectively weaponize your own biology for your benefit.
Exactly. You are capturing the mechanism of automaticity and aligning it with your highest intentions.
That completely flips the script.
It does. The text contrasts this inner impulse with outer inertia.
Right, the stuff pulling us away.
Outer inertia is everything in the physical world pulling you away from your goals. It is the exhaustion at the end of a long day.
The sudden influx of stressful emails.
The systemic noise of modern life, those forces are constantly bombarding you.
Yeah, they never stop.
But the inner impulse, those deeply myelinated neural pathways of past practice, they continually redirect your attention back to truth and self-awareness.
Almost automatically.
Almost automatically. Because the physical structure of your brain is pulling you there.
Okay, let's visualize this, because the physics of it are just fascinating to me.
Okay, let's hear it.
Instead of the usual self-help analogies, let's think about hydrology.
Hydrology, I like it.
Let's think about a river carving a canyon. When water first flows over flat ground, it just spreads out everywhere.
Right, it has no defined path.
Exactly. It is easily diverted by a tiny pebble or a gust of wind or just a slight change in elevation.
Which is your mind without practice.
Yes. Every little piece of outer inertia knocks your attention completely off course.
Makes sense.
But purvabhyasa, that past practice, is the continuous flow of water over the exact same path, year after year.
It carves a groove into the bedrock.
Exactly. And over time, that groove becomes a massive deep canyon, like the Grand Canyon.
And once the canyon is carved, the outer inertia matters significantly less.
Exactly. Because once you have a Grand Canyon of mindfulness in your brain, a sudden gust of winds, like a stressful meeting or a rude comment from a stranger, it cannot blow the river out of its path.
The structural walls of the canyon are simply too high.
Right. The mass of your past practice dictates the flow of the water, irresistibly pulling it forward along that grooved path. Yes, you don't have to consciously command the water to stay in the canyon. The structural gravity of the canyon does the work for you.
That is a highly accurate mechanistic analogy. And, if we extrapolate what this means for you, the listener, in the reality of your daily life.
Yeah, let's bring it back to the daily grind.
This concept offers a profound psychological relief.
How so?
Well, think about the days when you feel completely derailed. You skipped your morning routine, you reacted poorly in a meeting, you just feel completely overwhelmed by the outer inertia of your environment.
We've all had those days.
It is so easy to fall into the despair of thinking, I'm back to square one, all my progress is gone.
Right, the classic all-or-nothing mindset. I broke my streak, so the whole system is broken.
Exactly. But the neuroscience and verse 6.44 assure you that the system is not broken.
Because the canyon is still there.
Yes. Your past efforts were not deleted. The myelin sheath did not suddenly disintegrate just because you had a bad Tuesday.
That is so comforting.
The mass of that canyon is still there. It is silently working in the background. The text implies that your past practice acts as an inner impulse waiting to redirect you.
Waiting for the storm to pass.
Right. The moment the acute stress of that outer inertia passes, you will find yourself naturally desiring to return to your baseline of awareness.
Because your baseline has been physically, structurally altered by your past practice.
Precisely.
It's the comfort of knowing that your past good decisions are literally pulling you forward against your current exhaustion.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
But that inevitably raises a huge question.
What's that?
Well, if our past practice creates this massive structural gravity, what exactly is it pulling us away from?
Right.
Like, what is the false path we're trying to avoid here?
And this brings us to the second half of verse 6.44, which really deals with moving past the superficial layers of learning.
Okay, let's get into it.
Yes, the verse transitions to address the limitations of theoretical knowledge. The text introduces the concept of Shabda Brahma.
Shabda Brahma. Okay, our source notes define this as the realm of mere external rituals, dogmas, and the superficial recitation of texts.
Right. The specific Sanskrit line is Jigyasur apyogasya shabda brahmanti vartate.
And the translation.
It translates to, even an earnest inquirer into yoga transcends theoretical knowledge.
Transcends theoretical knowledge.
Yes. It is pointing toward the necessity of cultivating an internal gyroscope, one that allows you to navigate past the noise of pure theory and superficial dogma.
You know, we see Shabda Brahma everywhere today, probably more than in ancient times, just because of the sheer volume of information we have access to on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. We were drowning in theory.
It is the phenomenon of, like, buying 10 books on Stoicism but never actually practicing emotional regulation.
Right.
Or quoting Eastern philosophy on a podcast while, internally panicking about your metrics.
A very modern problem.
It's accumulating semantic knowledge, facts, figures, quotes, without ever converting it into experiential reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive science, we are really talking about the difference between semantic memory and procedural memory.
Semantic versus procedural. Break that down for us.
So semantic memory is your ability to recall facts. You can memorize the entire Bhagavad Gita.
Sure.
You can perfectly articulate the neuroscience of the brain. But semantic memory is notoriously fragile under stress.
Oh, interesting.
When that outer inertia hits, when you are in a crisis, when your heart rate elevates, when the amygdala floods your system with cortisol, your access to the prefrontal cortex is severely compromised.
And the prefrontal cortex is where that semantic knowledge is stored?
Exactly.
So under extreme stress, you literally cannot access the filing cabinet where you keep all those lovely Stoic quotes.
You are locked out of the filing cabinet.
Wow.
The brain defaults to its deepest procedural grooves.
Procedural memory.
Right. Procedural memory is the how-to memory. It is the myelinated pathways we just discussed.
The canyon.
Yes. If your deepest groove is just reciting theory in a calm room, that theory will evaporate the moment you face real friction.
Because it's not a deeply myelinated behavioral response.
Exactly. The text is warning us that an academic exercise or a theoretical debate is ultimately insufficient for true mindfulness.
It won't save you in a storm.
Right. To survive the outer inertia, you must transcend Sabda Brahma.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this in terms of gyroscopic physics in aviation, rather than just like riding a bicycle.
Aviation. I'm intrigued.
Okay, so if you are a pilot flying into a heavy storm, you can lose all visual reference to the horizon. You enter a state of what's called spatial disorientation.
Okay.
Your inner ear, your vestibular system, might be screaming at you that the plane is banking sharply to the left, even if you are flying perfectly level.
That sounds like a terrifying scenario.
It is, and it's entirely biologically driven. It's your body lying to you.
Right.
Now, you can have semantic knowledge, Shabda Brahma, of how the plane's instruments work. You can have read the manual on the attitude indicator, which is the gyroscope on the dashboard that shows the true horizon.
You know the facts about the instrument.
Exactly. But if you have only read the manual, when that storm hits and your own biology is inducing a panic response,
You're going to trust your body.
you will trust your flawed biological feelings over the instrument, you will overcorrect, and you will crash the plane. Transcending Sabda Brahma means you have spent hundreds of hours in a simulator. You have felt the panic, and you have trained your nervous system procedurally to ignore the false signals of your inner ear and trust the internal gyroscope.
You've made it a lived reality.
Exactly. The theory must become a structural adaptation in your nervous system.
That is a phenomenal articulation of the text's intent. And, notice the specific language the verse uses.
What's that?
It says, even an earnest inquirer transcends this theoretical knowledge.
Yeah, I noticed that. It feels incredibly forgiving.
It is deeply pragmatic. The word jiyasu means one who has a genuine desire to know.
So you don't have to be perfect.
No. It does not demand that you are a perfected master, a guru, or someone who has completely eradicated all anxiety.
That's a relief.
The sincerity of the inquiry is the catalyst. If you are sincerely trying to apply the knowledge, even if you fail repeatedly, that friction of trying and failing is what builds the procedural memory.
So the failure is actually part of the myelination process.
Exactly. The earnest attempt to align your actions with your values, rather than just talking about them, is what activates the transcendence beyond dogma.
So how does this internal gyroscope function for the listener right now?
Good question.
Because if we aren't literally flying planes through storms, what does trusting the instrument look like in a modern environment?
It looks like an automatic aversion to toxicity and superficiality.
Driven by your established equilibrium.
Exactly. Rather than sheer willpower. When you turn mindfulness into a lived reality, you establish a very specific baseline in your nervous system.
Yeah.
You begin to recognize what it feels like to be centered, calm, and highly observant. Once that internal gyroscope is spinning, anything that threatens to disrupt that equilibrium feels inherently uncomfortable.
It's an interesting inversion. Usually we think we have to force ourselves to be good.
Right.
Like, I have to force myself not to engage in office gossip, or I have to force myself to stay off social media.
But when the gyroscope is active, you don't have to consciously, agonizingly force yourself to avoid those things.
Because it just feels bad.
Yes. The office gossip, the rage-inducing social media algorithm, the petty arguments, they introduce a chaotic wobble into your gyroscope.
I know exactly what that wobble feels like.
We all do. Your nervous system recognizes it as a disruptive frequency. You naturally steer away from it.
Not because of rules.
No, not because you are adhering to a rigid set of rules you tape to your bathroom mirror, but because it genuinely feels bad to disrupt your equilibrium.
Okay, so the Shabda Brahma is the rigid diet plan that relies entirely on willpower.
Yes.
But the internal gyroscope is your body physically desiring whole foods because it recognizes how terrible the processed sugar makes you feel.
Perfect example.
The palate has fundamentally changed.
Yes, the system naturally rejects what does not serve its equilibrium.
Which is amazing.
But, and this is a critical transition in the text, establishing that equilibrium in the first place requires a highly specific, highly active kind of effort.
Right. We can't just wish it into existence.
We cannot just rely on the past momentum forever, and we cannot just hope the gyroscope spins itself.
Which means we have to look at the mechanics of change.
Yes.
Because if I have myelinated terrible pathways, if my Grand Canyon is carved in the direction of anxiety and reactivity, how do I actively change the flow of that river today?
And this brings us to verse 6.45, which provides the active, muscular mechanics of mastery.
All right, let's get into the mechanics.
We are looking at two major concepts here: deliberate practice and emotional detoxification.
Okay, let's start with the first one.
Let's begin with deliberate practice. Translated from the Sanskrit pratna jatamana,
Prayatna jatamata.
the verse states, and the yogi, striving with earnest perseverance.
Earnest perseverance.
This phrase entirely shatters the Western misconception of Eastern philosophy.
How so?
Well, we often view it as a purely passive, blissed-out state of accepting everything without effort. Just sit under a tree and vibe.
Right, the stereotype of the monk just floating in peace.
Exactly. But the text explicitly demands steady, intentional perseverance across cognitive, emotional, and spiritual domains.
Okay, wait. I have a major point of friction with this concept.
Oh.
Specifically how it pairs with the next phrase in the text. Because the text pairs this earnest perseverance directly with the concept of being cleansed of all subconscious conditioning and mental toxins.
Right, which is the Sanskrit Sashuddha Kilbya.
Sashuddha Kilbya. The emotional detoxification.
Yes, the purification of the mind.
But those two ideas feel completely contradictory to me.
Why is that?
Because when we use words like cleanse, detoxification, or purification, we almost universally associate them with a passive process.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like, I think of a water filter passively catching impurities as water flows through it.
Yeah.
Or I think of sitting in a sauna passively sweating out toxins.
Right, you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the text pair is cleansed of toxins directly with striving with earnest perseverance.
It does.
How does active muscular striving result in the clearing or emptying of trauma and reactive conditioning? Usually when we strive, we are adding mass. We add muscle, we add skills, we build canyons. How does striving equal cleansing?
That is a brilliant observation. And it cuts to the very heart of the paradox of neuroplasticity.
Okay, help me resolve the paradox.
To resolve this, we have to discard the water filter metaphor entirely.
Gone.
The mental toxins the text refers to, kilbya, are not passive blockages. They are not dirt trapped in a pipe.
What are they then?
The cognitive distortions, the deeply ingrained trauma responses, the hyperreactivity. These are highly active, biologically expensive software programs running in the background of your brain.
Oh, wow. So they're energetic loops? They're myelinated pathways of their own.
Exactly. Your mental toxins are structured from the exact same biological material as your virtues.
That is terrifying, but it makes total sense.
They are action potentials traveling down myelinated axons. And this is where the neuroscience of synaptic pruning perfectly explains the ancient concept of active detoxification.
Synaptic pruning?
Yes. Remember, your brain is a metabolic miser. It hates wasting energy.
Right, it wants to be efficient.
There is a biological rule in the brain. Use it or lose it. If you stop sending electrical signals down a specific neural pathway, the brain tags that pathway for demolition.
Wait, really? How does it actually do that? What is the mechanism of demolition?
It involves specialized immune cells in the brain called microglia.
Microglia, okay.
When a synapse is no longer being utilized, it weakens. This is a process called long-term depression, or LTD.
Okay.
The microglia recognize this weakened state, and they literally engulf and digest the synaptic connections.
They eat them.
They physically eat the unused neural bridges to save energy and make room for new connections.
That is incredible. They are literally pruning the physical architecture of the brain.
Because
How does this connect to earnest perseverance and striving?
the old toxic pathway, the anxiety loop, the trauma response,
Mhm.
is the path of least resistance.
Right. It's the deep canyon.
Exactly. If you do nothing, the water flows down the toxic canyon. To detoxify the brain, you must actively strive to not use that pathway.
Oh, I see.
You must deliberately build a dam, divert the water, and force it to carve a new path. This requires immense muscular cognitive effort.
You have to consciously observe the trigger.
Yes, feel the urge to react and deliberately choose a different response. By doing so, you starve the old toxic pathway of action potentials.
You are actively starving the toxic loop so the microglia will come in and eat it.
Yes, the act of striving is the deliberate choice to redirect your attention. The detoxification is the biological pruning away of those old toxic synaptic connections by the microglia.
It takes immense perseverance to catch a deeply ingrained, highly myelinated reaction in real time and redirect it.
It is exhausting work.
But that conscious redirection is the active work that results in the cleared space.
Absolutely.
Let's apply this to a highly realistic scenario for the listener.
Let's do it.
Let's say you are preparing for a massive presentation at work. It's a high-stakes environment. Your historical conditioning, Your kilbia, or mental toxin, is a profound, paralyzing imposter
A
syndrome.
very common toxin.
Yeah. In neuroscience, this is often linked to an overactive default mode network, or DMN.
Yes. The DMN is the network in your brain that lights up when you are ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, or obsessing over your sense of self and how others perceive you.
Right. It is the biological seat of the ego and self-referential thought.
And in high-stress situations, an unregulated DMN will hijack your perception entirely.
Okay, so the software program boots up. Your DMN is firing on all cylinders. The well-worn pathway of anxiety is heavily myelinated.
The water is rushing down the canyon.
Exactly. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets shallow, and your perception becomes completely clouded. You start seeing threats in the audience that aren't even there.
Right. A colleague yawns, and your brain interprets it as a devastating critique of your competence.
Because the toxic pathway is acting as a lens, distorting the incoming data.
Yes.
So in this moment, what does the deliberate practice, the pratnatyadamana, actually look like?
That's not what most people think.
Right. It isn't just striving to memorize your PowerPoint slides more aggressively.
Oh, that is external effort.
The internal deliberate practice is the muscular cognitive discipline of interrupting the default mode network.
Yeah.
It is the moment you observe the panic rising, and instead of letting the water rush down the canyon of imposter syndrome, you actively engage your executive control network.
You intervene.
You take a slow, deliberate physiological sigh to regulate your autonomic nervous system. You recognize the imposter syndrome not as an objective truth about your worth, but as a temporary, predictable neurological event.
You observe the software running without identifying as the software.
Yes. And you deliberately steer your attention away from the self-referential fear and focus entirely on the external task, the material you are presenting.
Which is incredibly hard.
Doing that once is exhausting. It takes massive effort. But doing it with earnest perseverance over and over again, every single time the imposter syndrome arises.
That is what leads to Sajjata Kilbi.
You starve the DMN's anxiety loop of action potentials. The microglia prunes the connections, and eventually you walk into those massive meetings, and the imposter syndrome simply does not boot up anymore.
Because the hardware to run the program isn't there anymore.
Exactly. The toxin has been cleared not by a passive cleanse, but by the active, unrelenting striving of your awareness.
It is the ultimate testament to neuroplasticity. We're not trapped by our past conditioning, provided we're willing to engage in the rigorous effort of rewiring.
It's empowering.
It really is. And that leads us to the final and perhaps most awe-inspiring promise of this ancient text.
Okay, let's get into it.
We've examined the physics of past momentum, the necessity of the internal gyroscope, and the biological reality of emotional detoxification.
Right.
But what is the ultimate trajectory of all this effort? Where does the canyon lead?
The end goal.
Yes. Verse 6.45 concludes by revealing the immense, almost incomprehensible scale of this growth over time.
The ultimate compounding interest of mindfulness.
Exactly. The verse uses a profound term, aneka janmasasita.
Aneka janmasasata.
This translates to, perfected through the cumulative efforts of multiple lifetimes, attaining the supreme destination.
Which is pagatim.
Multiple lifetimes. Okay.
Yes.
This raises an important question because that phrase immediately introduces a metaphysical or cosmological scale that might, lose some modern listeners who are grounded purely in Western materialism.
That's a very fair concern.
How do we interpret the scale of multiple lifetimes in a way that remains structurally true to the psychology we've been discussing?
It's a vital question. Because whether a listener interprets multiple lifetimes literally, according to the Vedic concepts of reincarnation and karma,
Right.
or metaphorically, as the many distinct lifetimes or phases we live through within our single biological lifespan, the underlying psychological mechanism remains identical.
So it works either way. Yes, you have lived many lives already. The child you were is dead.
Yeah.
The teenager you were is gone. The young, anxious professional is a past life. The text is demanding a radical expansion of your time horizon.
That makes a lot of sense.
It is demanding immense patience and trust in the long arc of inner development.
Because we suffer so much from temporal myopia.
We really do.
We zoom in so closely on our immediate failures, like, I lost my temper with my spouse this morning, therefore I am a complete failure and my mindfulness practice is a sham.
We are so hard on ourselves.
We judge the efficacy of our internal gyroscope on a 24-hour timeline, but this text is saying, zoom out. Look at the timeline of your soul or the timeline of your entire biological existence.
The central mechanism here is compounding.
Compounding.
Transformational growth reaching that supreme destination, or porigatim, is almost never a sudden cinematic lightning strike of enlightenment.
It's not a movie montage.
No. It is the compounding summit of every single microscopic moment of mindfulness, reflection, and ethical action accumulated over an agonizingly long period of time.
Just drop by drop.
Yes. Just as financial interest compounds invisibly at first, so does cognitive and spiritual effort.
So what does this all mean for the architecture of the mind?
Well, let's hear your take.
Let's use an analogy that explains the math behind this compounding rather than just relying on the concept of a savings account.
I love good math analogy. Let's do it.
Think about how we train machine learning models, specifically deep neural networks.
Okay.
When you are training an AI to recognize an image or process language, it starts out completely ignorant. You fit it a piece of data and it makes a prediction, and it gets it wrong.
And then the algorithm performs backpropagation.
Exactly. It measures the error, and it goes back through the millions of artificial synapses in its network, and it adjusts the weights of those connections.
By a microscopic fraction of a decimal point.
Yes. It tweaks the algorithmic weighting. Now, if you look at the model after one single adjustment, it seems completely useless.
It's still making errors.
It looks like it hasn't learned a single thing.
Because the single adjustment is practically invisible to the naked eye.
Yes. But you do it 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times. You run it through countless iterations, countless lifetimes of the training loop.
And the math starts to work.
Every single microscopic adjustment of the weights interacts with every other adjustment. They compound. And suddenly, after 1,000,000,000 iterations, the model achieves profound accuracy.
It recognizes the image perfectly.
It generates language flawlessly. The mastery looks like magic from the outside, but structurally, it is just the compounding result of 1,000,000,000 tiny, localized adjustments.
That is a phenomenal translation of Anika Jamasinzada.
Right.
Every time you catch yourself ruminating and you take a breath to center yourself, you are adjusting the algorithmic weighting of your biological neural network.
Even if you don't feel it.
Exactly. You don't feel enlightened in that moment. You still feel the anxiety. You feel like that one breath didn't change a single thing.
But it did.
But the text and the mathematics of neural networks guarantee that the adjustment was made. The weight shifted.
And if we extrapolate on the profound psychological relief this brings, it entirely removes the burden of immediate perfection.
It takes all the pressure off.
You don't have to achieve enlightenment by Friday. You don't have to permanently eradicate your imposter syndrome by the time your next meeting starts.
The emphasis is entirely on the accumulation of data points over time.
Yes. The supreme destination is reached not by a sudden superhuman leap over the mountain, but by the relentless compounding of tiny, mindful, algorithmic adjustments.
It removes the despair of the relapse.
How so?
Well, when you realize that the neural adjustment you made yesterday is still structurally present in your brain, even if you had a terrible reaction today, it gives you the grace to keep going.
Because the data is saved.
Right. The work you did last year is still acting as a gravitational force today.
It closes the loop perfectly with verse 6.44.
It does.
Because the tiny algorithmic adjustments you make today are the gravitational pull of tomorrow.
Yes.
The compounding interest you earn is the irresistible force, the avashopirat, that carries you forward against outer inertia.
The two verses are an engine of continuous self-sustaining growth.
They feed into each other.
You practice deliberately, adjusting the weights. That active striving starves the toxic pathways, leading to emotional detoxification.
The microglia eat the bad synapses.
Right. And the healthy pathways myelinate, carving deeper canyons, compounding over time.
And eventually that compounded mass becomes a gravitational force so dense and powerful that it saves you on the days when you are just too exhausted to try.
It is an architectural masterpiece of human psychology, laid out thousands of years before we had the fMRI machines to prove its structural reality.
It really is.
It acknowledges our deep flaws, our tendency toward distraction, and our heavy conditioning. But it provides a guaranteed mechanical pathway to supreme mastery.
Well, it's time to bring this all together, because we have covered an immense amount of territory today.
We certainly have.
We started by exploring Purvabhyasa, diving into the neuroscience of myelination to understand how our past practices create a physical, irresistible gravitational pull.
Proving that automaticity can actually be the hero of our story if we carve the right canyon.
Exactly. And then we examine the limits of Shabda Brahma, understanding that theoretical knowledge is totally useless in a storm and that we must build an internal gyroscope through lived procedural memory.
We then broke down the rigorous muscular mechanics of that change.
To the deliberate practice.
Right. We looked at how deliberate perseverance and active cognitive striving actually alter the physical structure of the brain.
Starving those toxic loops of action potential so that microglia can prune them away in a true biological emotional detoxification.
Which all leads to the ultimate summit.
The compounding interest of our mindfulness, where every microscopic adjustment to our neural weighting builds over a lifetime or multiple lifetimes into unstoppable transformational mastery.
Which leaves us with a final thought to consider as we close this deep dive.
What's that?
Well, we've established that every single ethical action, every deliberate pause, and every moment of reflection physically alters your brain and compounds over time to create an irresistible gravitational pull.
Yes, the science backs it up.
So if that is true, what is the smallest, seemingly most insignificant moment of mindfulness you can invest in today?
Oh, I love that question. Because according to the ancient wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita and the literal wiring of your own nervous system, that tiny effort, that single microscopic adjustment will inevitably become the gravity that saves you tomorrow.
It's guaranteed.
The landscape of the mind might seem completely murky and the outer inertia might feel overwhelming, but the laws of psychological momentum are absolute.
You are building your own gravity every single second.
Make it pull you where you want to go. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanics of your own mind, keep learning, and above all, trust in the long-term process of your own inner development.